The new theater of the mind. The Bruce Collins Show.
Welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show. We're very glad to have you join us. Tonight, we'll be talking about dogs. Friendly, cute, sweet dogs. Guess what? They're evil. Evil. Just kidding. But tonight we've got some outstanding guests. One of them is Bryan Bailey, recently on Fox and Friends, to talk about treating your dog like a wolf. The Wolf Whisperer, Bryan Bailey, later in the hour. And also, tonight we speak to a legendary music producer, the man behind the Muscle Shoals sound, Rick Hall. The Bruce Collins Show airs every Friday night at midnight right here at WWPR, 1490 AM. You can listen to past archives of The Bruce Collins Show at ipbn-fm.com. That's ipbn-fm.com. There's a tab for shows right there on the Intrepid Paradigm Broadcasting Network website. Click on The Bruce Collins Show. We would appreciate it if you're able to spread the word for our show by word of mouth, social media, or in whatever creative way you can. Also, we have a Facebook page for The Bruce Collins Show. Please like us there. And you can email the show at bruce_collins_show@AOL.com. The Bruce Collins Show also has a YouTube channel. Visit YouTube, search for The Bruce Collins Show channel, subscribe, and catch all the latest shows on YouTube. Well, my friend, we have an action-packed hour tonight, and it all begins with the Wolf Whisperer, Bryan Bailey, and then later in the hour we're going to talk music with a legendary music producer, Rick Hall, in a moment. And joining us this week is Bryan Bailey. Bryan Bailey is a nationally certified master trainer and pharmacotherapy behaviorist and decorated veteran of the U.S. Navy, working extensively as a supervisor and trainer for the U.S. Navy's classified dolphin and sea lion projects. He has studied wolves in the wild, trained law enforcement dogs for narcotics detection and search and rescue, and much more. In his new book, Embracing the Wild in Your Dog, nationally recognized award-winning animal behaviorist Bryan Bailey explains all that man has done to carve the wolf from the wild to create a surrogate human. Today's dog is still a wolf at heart, and Bryan emphasizes the damaging and paralytic problem of attaching our human traits to our pets. And Bryan's website is tamingthewild.com. Again, the new book, Embracing the Wild in Your Dog by Bryan Bailey. Bryan Bailey, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Hi, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on. Now, before we talk about your book, as we said in the introduction, you were a trainer for the U.S. Navy's classified dolphin and sea lion project. Even though I guess we can't talk about that, how surprised would we be with how much the Navy was able to do with dolphins and sea lions?
Well, the good news, first of all, is that the projects that I worked have been unclassified for many years now, so okay. I can talk about them.
Oh, good.
But the United States military, especially the Navy, has utilized marine mammals for many years now, for well over 30 to 40 years. And these animals that definitely served a vital purpose for keeping our ships safe and our harbors safe and our personnel safe.
Now, is there a distinction between levels of intelligence between dolphins and sea lions?
There is. A dolphin, I would definitely say, is a much more intelligent animal. Sea lions remind me a lot of, no wonder they get the nickname sea dogs. They literally act like dogs. They really do, and they seem to have about the same learning level as dogs. A little bit different because the dog's domesticated and the sea lion isn't. If you pet a sea lion, for example, you better bring fish to the offering, otherwise you may not get the time of day. Whereas with my dogs, I can pet them and they'll still work for me and do the behaviors I need them to do. But these are exotic creatures. If you don't have fish, you're not going to get a whole lot of response from them.
Growing up in the Alaska wild, you learned about wolves there. What did you learn about wolves?
Well, I think the neat thing about when I grew up was in the 1960s and early 1970s. Alaska was still a very remote area. I actually knew people who still made an entire living fur trapping. And I was able to, I had a blessed time in which I fell under the wings and the guidance of a Special Forces Survival Instructor who did not have a son. He had 2 daughters, and so I became his surrogate son, so to speak, and his little prodigy. And we would travel out in the wild to every opportunity we had. And the neat thing was that back in those days, these wolves, and even some still today in Alaska, are not so human savvy as they are afraid of humans like they are here in the lower 48 in the southern parts of Canada, where they've been hunted and shot at many times. So it allowed us the opportunity to observe them in their natural setting, behaving very naturally, and to draw a lot of comparisons between them and our dogs, and just it was really neat. I never, like I write in my book, I never saw one behavior common to a wolf that I did not see common to my own dogs.
Now, when I was a teenager, my parents went to some type of a meeting, and it was at night, and I lived in Tucson, Arizona. And during the summer months, there's the monsoon season where you have flash flooding, thunder, and lightning. And we had a miniature German Schnauzer. And this dog was pretty stubborn in some ways. He made a great guard dog. But during the thunder and lightning season, he cowered next to me. So I thought, here's this defenseless dog. He needs my help. So I picked him up, and he made my arm kibbles and bits. He took a big bite out of my arm. And I threw him down, and I looked down, and he was cowering again next to me. So it obviously wasn't a personal thing. But you think the average dog owner should look at his pet as a wolf, correct?
Definitely as a modified version of it, to look more in that direction and less in the human direction. Mm-hmm. Just being humans, we're kind of comfortable with our own species. And unless you know a lot of specific behavioral traits common with wolves and domestic dogs, you're not going to know how to attach any behaviors to natural mechanisms like the attack that your dog did in a situation like that. So we try to explain it away like a human, like, why did my dog do that? Did I make my dog angry at me? Or why did it turn on me? And we're caught without answers because in a human standpoint, well, the dog would have never done that. You're just simply trying to keep the dog safe and reassure it, and there's no way that the dog should have acted out. But they do. And so if we learn to look at our dogs with an open mind and a different viewpoint, the viewpoint that nature gave us to look through, then we'll safeguard ourselves against these unexpected attacks, and we'll understand why our dog does what it does, and therefore we can prevent some of these. We can actually help our dogs blossom and conform to our human existence, which is very difficult for them to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have a cat these days, which has nothing to do with my dog experience. But the one thing I notice about my cat is, let's say I give him Friskies and it's wet cat food, and it dries out, and later in the day I'll replace it and put some new stuff down. If I take the old stuff away, the cat, it doesn't really bother them. But a dog, if you remove its food sometimes, it will remove an appendage. Is that part of his wild nature?
It is. These are creatures who evolved from an animal who is like any predator on the earth, governed by the law of limited resources. So our dogs have no clue. They're never going to know that we humans, we furless bipeds that live with them, are going to be lifelong benefactors. So it's a matter of eat what you can eat now. There is none of this, maybe I'll get an evening meal tomorrow, or maybe there's a whole bag of food over there and I'll get it later. It is eat what I can eat now. And sometimes we humans take on the role to a dog as an opponent, meaning back away from my food. You're not going to touch my food or take my food from me. This is my food. So it's a survival instinct. It's very powerful. In fact, food is the very catalyst of all aggression that we've ever known literally on the planet Earth among predators. The life at its most basic form is nothing more than an exchange of energy for more energy. And so therefore, when there's only a limited supply of energy, but many, many competitors for it, well then we're going to have a little bit of aggression. And I tell people, using a human example, imagine being raised with 8 brothers and sisters, and mom throws one biscuit on the table. I guarantee a few elbows will start getting thrown as a fight over the biscuit occurs.
Yeah, definitely. And again, the book is Embracing the Wild in Your Dog by Bryan Bailey. I highly recommend this book. I know you can get it on Amazon as both a hard copy and a Kindle. Now, you have a chapter called The Hammer. What do you mean when you say that a dog uses a hammer?
I use hammer as a metaphor to describe the most dominant tool in their bag of survival equipment. They have many tools. They have immobility. They have displaced behaviors, vocalization, flight. But the most dominant tool is this big, ugly thing called a hammer. And it's a tool that nature gave them thousands of years ago to allow for ingestion, digestion, and reproduction in a hostile and competitive world. So it's a metaphor for aggression, and they will use it. Dogs still have jaws, claws, and paws. In fact, to the tune of almost 5 million reported dog bites every year just in America alone. So they will, and they give no thought to it like we would. It's just a natural mechanism. If the other tools don't work, then I will use this tool. And if they gain any perceived success in using that tool, then of course, nature's rule is success begets success. I'll simply go back to that tool. And sometimes I'll just skip all the other tools. I'll just go straight to that one. And that's something very unique to dogs that you wouldn't catch among other social predators.
Mm-hmm. Now, Bryan, you just cited that survey or number of 5 million dog bites. So is dog aggression on the rise? And if so, why?
It is on the rise. It's on the rise of about 6 to 7% per year.
Wow.
I think this year we will actually have eclipsed that. We're probably going to look at about a 9% increase compared to 2014. As I write in my book, I believe the number one reason is the fact that we have animals that not as high a quality of animals as we used to have. Dogs have become extremely popular, and like almost anything in this world, as soon as it becomes really popular, then everyone wants to do it. And when we start having that demand and supply issue, then quality typically goes down. I don't care what the product is. Here in America, we're breeding so many dogs so quickly that we're breaking nature's rule. Out in the wild, for example, wolves and dogs only have 2 types of genetic baselines. You're either born with dominant genes or submissive genes. And out in the wild, only the dominant breeds to the dominant within a pack. So, and yet they still, even D plus D equals dominant over submissive. So we still get submissive genes from that. But here in America, we breed submissive to submissive all day long, and we have no clue even as to that we're even doing that. We don't know about this. We're not very knowledgeable in genetics. And therefore, when you breed submissive to submissive, which a submissive wolf is already a fearful creature, you create even more fearful dogs. And therefore, they perceive threats where threats really don't exist. For example, I just met with a client today and evaluated their dog, and when they bent over to pick up their dog, the dog bit them. And they're like, why? I just wanted to pet him. I just wanted to give him a hug and some kisses. And they didn't realize that their large body looming over to them, picking this animal up, the dog perceived that as a threat. Whereas their other 2 dogs, they can pick up fine. So genetics is the number one reason why aggression is on the rise, and the other reason is we don't expect to be bitten by our dogs. Mm-hmm. And I'm working on a second book right now called The Hammer, Understanding, Treating, and Preventing Dog Aggression. And some of the interviews I'll tell them that there were actual fatalities have occurred, well over 200, in which the person that was killed owned the dog that killed them for 3 years or greater. It was already living with them and had done so peacefully for up to 3 years plus. So we just don't expect it, and we treat them like we would treat a human, and we actually provoke a lot of this aggression because we think, well, I wouldn't do that, so therefore why would my dog?
So if we don't know our dog's genetic leanings, what is the best way to answer this problem? Is it human training or dog training, or a combination of the two?
It's always going to be a combination of the two, but leaning more towards human training. It's a matter of changing our perception. I write an example in the book in which I had a mother and a father sitting in front of me. To the mother's right was a 3-year-old daughter named Susie, and to the father's left was a 3-year-old Rottweiler named Rocky. And long story short, Rocky had Susie's Barbie in his mouth one day, and Susie wanted to take it back. Rocky warned. Susie ignored because she's only 3 years old. She doesn't know what a growl means. And Rocky attacked, and Susie gets 9 staples in the side of her head. And her mother's like, why would he do this? We got him when she was born. We got him as a puppy, so he would grow up to be her big brother, protect her. Why would he do this over a Barbie? And I'm like, ma'am, that's not his sister. He doesn't view her as his sister or someone he's supposed to protect. To him, she's standing head level, meaning she's looking him in the eyes. So when a child looks a dog in the eyes, the dog views that child as an adult. You're an opponent. And so he warned her, back off. My Barbie. She ignored. He made her go away. And I said, of course he doesn't show any remorse. That's about how long it lasted for him. He warned, she ignored, he attacked, she left, he kept Barbie. End of story. And these clients, fortunately, went on, and they went, wow, I had no clue. I would never have thought that before. They went on to be some of the best clients I've ever had. Rocky has since passed from this world, and now they have a new Rottweiler, and they also have 2 additional daughters. So as soon as I changed their mindset, they embraced the wild in their dog, and wow, it's just an incredible thing when that occurs.
Wow. Now, Bryan, you've been a master trainer. Are there different types of training that would be suitable for different types of dogs?
Yes, sir. That's for sure. There are, for example, I think one of the things that people have to take into consideration first is what is the goal of their training program. And, if I want to just teach my dog a couple of tricks, then it's going to be an all-positive experience. I'm going to use food just like I would of the marine mammals, and we're trying to entice the dog into performing certain behaviors for me. However, if it's behaviors that I have to have steadfast reliability, then there would need to be a little bit of a consequence. For example, there's just too many competing motivators out there in the world. So a dog who's trained just using treats only, one day, if you're unfortunate, this dog sees a squirrel across the highway and wants to go chase the squirrel. And you yell, come. Well, if there's never been a consequence for not coming, well, then the dog's going to make a real quick decision. Treat or dry dog biscuit. And if the dog makes the wrong decision, it could cause the dog its life, or it could cause a human's life, meaning when a human avoids the dog with their car and slams into another car. So anytime it comes to requiring a reliable behavior that has to happen, then we always have to involve, just like nature does. Wolves do the same thing. Lions do the same thing. I've studied them all. I've studied hyenas. They all do the same thing. South African wild dogs. As I write my book in a chapter called Will, obedience is required. It's required. Mm-hmm. So therefore, we should require it as well when we need dogs to do certain behaviors for us to keep them safe and to keep us safe. So it really does depend upon, A, what is your training goal? B, what dog are you working with? Is it more of a submissive dog? Is it more of a dominant dog? All of these factors are taken in. So you use literally a combination, a melting pot of methodologies that all have to be adjusted per dog. One methodology that works on this dog may not work on that dog. So a trainer has to have many tools in their tool bag, many tools, and an open mind and an ability to read the dog.
In the introduction, I had described you as a pharmacotherapy behaviorist. What is pharmacotherapy? It sounds like drug therapy.
Well, it's a good news, bad news type situation, meaning I really feel sad that we have to use pharmaceuticals to help our dogs, but I'm really grateful that we at least have the capability of doing that. Mm-hmm. I see about 15 to 20 dogs a week that at the end result of these meetings, some of these dogs, a vast majority, are then placed on a pharmacotherapy regimen in which they're given antidepressants to help them get over fear, get over such phobias like separation anxiety or chasing my tail or fly snapping, or I perceive everything as a threat and therefore I'm going to use the hammer anytime one of these threats comes up to me. These are maladaptive animals. These are animals that are so deep in submissive land, so deep, that literally every day they encounter very fearful events. that causes them to react. So all we do is we simply give them medication to raise the threshold of the stimulus required to cause them to react. And then once we reach that state, we now embark upon behavioral modification. So the medication is really only used to facilitate behavioral modification. So it's kind of like in those old B-rated horror movies in which the villain was always after some beautiful blonde, and she would be caught screaming, and then someone had to slap her to get her to focus and get away from the bad guy. Well, I call the medicine, for the lack of a better example, my slap. It gets the animal focused, and then once I have the animal focused, then I can use behavioral modification to help it through its world. Mm-hmm. So it's really neat how it works. But once again, it's just really sad that we have to do this because you don't have to use pharmacotherapy on wolves.
Yeah. Now, I think we may have touched a little bit on this, but I know you write that dog owners are exploited by the pet industry. How so?
Well, they are. The pet industry is an incredible economic engine. In fact, it's one of the only ones that's never suffered from an economic downturn. And its profits are raised by 6 to 8% per year, and they've been doing so for 27 straight years. When we had our last recession, there wasn't even not even a hiccup. And last year we spent to the tune of $61 billion on our dogs. We spend more money in 1 year in America than the combined rest of the world spends in almost 5 years. We are an incredible dog-loving society. And so the one thing that they've studied in the economic world of pet industry is that Americans are unusually afraid of wolves. And it's easy to understand why. I mean, when we were little kids who tried to eat Little Red Riding Hood, who tried to eat the 3 little pigs. I've heard of a werewolf. I've yet to hear of a werepoodle. Even in the Bible, Jesus used the wolf as a metaphor 13 times to describe evil and greed. Shakespeare's King Lear, Brothers Grimm. It goes on and on and on. So the wolf is always the villain. And they've studied Americans. They found that Americans were more fearful of wolves, although they were more likely to be killed by their own dog, a horse, or a bee. So knowing this, the pet industry does not want dog owners in America to think that they own anything like a domestic wolf, because they know if they did, if they started to view them more like that, then they would forego some of their spending on some silly little humanistic type gimmicks and little things that their anthropomorphism, where they view their dog as a human, a person in a fur coat, motivates them to buy. And so that could cut spending almost 30% literally in 1 year, and just do the math on 30% of the $61 billion. So yeah, the American people are exploited by the pet industry. They will try to do anything they can to discredit any sort of studies that show a correlation between dogs and wolves. It's a money decision. It's all big money. As
I sourced earlier, my German Schnauzer when I was a kid was a great guard dog. But he was very loyal to his family, a little bit moody, but loyal. But whenever we had other guests around, he was very bothered by them, to the point where if someone was over, they were not to make any sudden movements or anything like that. A dog like that, where you are okay with it guarding your facility, a visiting family member for a dog like that, I would imagine, would be a threat to that dog. There's no real way to train a dog out of that behavior if that's the way you want it normally. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those situations where you know, which one do you want, your cake or the frosting, or have your cake and eat it too. It's very difficult. And that's another reason for a lot of the reported dog bites. Especially like I had several clients during this last Thanksgiving. They had college children coming home that hadn't been home for a year. And yeah, they may be family, but to your dog, they're an alien wolf. And out in the wild, when a wolf from Pack A comes across a wolf from Pack B on Pack A's territory, they'll run it down and kill it. And I mean, they don't just kill it. They eviscerate this thing. They wipe it off the face of the earth. So they don't tolerate this at all. So the watered down version, the domestic version, the deactivated genetic version in our dogs is a dog that is very territorial and very wary of strange people, alien people, even though those aliens could be your family. But to the dog, no, not family to me, friend. I ain't seen this human. I don't remember ever seeing it. And with the limited memory of dogs, some dogs, a year of not seeing it, they may not know you. And I've had several veterans bitten when they came home and hugged the wife and hugged the daughter. Then when they hugged the dog tried to take half their ear off. So, yeah, it's one of those where if you want to have the dog be a protected dog all the time and then only part-time, not so, then I'd probably just recommend put the dog up when these people are over. Just put it away. Be a little bit of a zookeeper until they leave.
Personally, if someone were to come to you as a family, and let's say they had small children, and they said, we want to buy a pit bull, do you think that's an appropriate dog for families?
Wow, boy, you're asking me an incredibly emotionally charged question there. I mean, I tell you, there's some people that would die for their pit bulls. I'm going to have to go with the statistical averages. First of all, I'm going to tell them no for several reasons. One, the pit bull has killed human beings, more so than any other breed, by far, not even close, by far. Also, the children are the age group of 2 to 9 is the age group, as reported by the CDC, is the age group most often bitten by dogs. And so if I'm going to have one of my children bitten by a dog, I can certainly come up with several that I would be, it would all be bad, but, if I push come to shove, I think I'd rather have my child bitten by a golden doodle than by a pit bull.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, your book is Embracing the Wild in Your Dog, Bryan Bailey. I highly recommend this book. I actually have it on my Kindle, and I've been working through it. Again, it's Bryan Bailey, Embracing the Wild in Your Dog. If you have a dog or you want to know more about dogs, this is the book to get. Again, it's Embracing the Wild in Your Dog. Now, before we go, Bryan, what can people find on your website, tamingthewild.com?
That website is basically kind of like a landing page, a microsite for the book. They can find a little bit more information about me. I have a couple of blogs on there that they can read about. These are very informative blogs. I should have more of those. I transfer them from another website onto that site before long. So really just a lot about the book. They can get a free chapter of the book if they want to read a free chapter of the book. They can read the blogs and just kind of get a feel for me and what I believe in and get to kind of know me a little bit more as a person. They can also follow me on Twitter. It's just Bryan with a Y, Bailey, Bailey, at Bryan Bailey Wolf. So you can follow me on Twitter if you want to do that as well.
Excellent. Bryan Bailey, Embracing the Wild in Your Dog, and hopefully we can have you back when you write the next book, The Hammer. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thanks, Bruce. I really appreciate it. Yes, really great questions. I really appreciate that.
Great. And joining us this week is Mr. Rick Hall. Rick Hall is a legendary American record producer, songwriter, music publisher, and musician who is best known as the owner and proprietor of Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and founder of the modern-day Muscle Shoals sound. His new book is The Man from Muscle Shoals, My Journey from Shame to Fame by Rick Hall. Rick Hall, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Well, Bruce, thank you, sir. I appreciate it very much. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be on your program.
Well, it's great to have you on. Now, you've had a long, successful career in music. I understand from your book that you learned your work ethic from your father, didn't you?
Yes, sir. I absolutely did. He was behind me all the way, and he taught me to be aggressive and work hard and learn my trade well, and I would become a very big record producer. So I've listened to him, and I've done that, and I have become a big record producer.
Yeah. Now, I understand you quit your job at Reynolds Metal Company to try to make it in music. Do you have any regrets about that?
No, not really. I don't have any regrets about that, Bruce. I was there, but I came out of the service, the Korean War, and went to work there. And my uncle was the man who hired us and fired us, and so he was first cousin. Well, he was my uncle. He was my father's first cousin, but he had a lot of influence. Obviously, you know, you had to have an influence back then to get good jobs, and especially in the South. And he saw me as being a likable person and someone who maybe would stay with him a long time. But I only stayed 2 years, so I split and built myself a recording studio, and I've been in the recording business ever since then.
The original recording studio was on the second floor above a drugstore. Did you ever get any complaints from the drugstore about noise?
Well, we might have. I didn't get any directly, but the man who owned the drugstore was a partner of mine, and he probably got some complaints about the loud music upstairs or whatever. But I never got any complaints, no.
Now, can you give us a list or talk about some of the performers you actually produced?
Absolutely. I sure can. Well, the first artist I produced was Arthur Alexander, and I had a hit on him. And then, of course, I did Clarence Carter, Aretha Franklin, Otis Redding, Paul Anka, Mac Davis, Marie Osmond, Tom Jones,
wow,
the Gatlin Brothers, Wilson Pickett, Etta James, Dwayne Allman and the Allman Brothers, and the Osmond Brothers, who are a teeny bopper group, and Donny Osmond, and of course Bobby Gentry, Alabama, the Gatlins, and Jerry Reed, and Shenandoah.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. So if you could describe the Muscle Shoals sound, how would you describe it?
Well, I'd have to start. I get that question a lot, and it's a tough gig. It's hard for me to describe it, but let me tell you how I usually describe it as being heavy on the bass drum, heavy on the kick drum, of course, and heavy on the bass, and with a mixture of country music and black music.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, we've got a reputation for doing black music, but the Duke's mixture worked for us. I never saw a black man until I was 13 years old, and then I became a black, not in color, but a black record producer.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, most all the early acts that I did were black people.
Yeah.
And they were from Muscle Shoals, most of them. Some came in from the record label started utilizing me because I was a white man that was producing hit records, and Muscle Shoals, Alabama, a town of 8,000 people, and so I was quite popular. I had several number one records. Clarence Carter's Patches was number one. Aretha Franklin's first hit record she ever did was a number one record. I Ain't Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You. Mac Davis's Baby Debbie Don't Get Hooked on Me.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul Anka's You're Having My Baby. And so I was on a roll. I was on a tear. And so the way you get a lot of business is to become good at it.
Yeah.
And I was as good as you could find.
Now, when you go way back, is a lot of this music, has it been, at the base of it, has it been influenced by gospel music?
Bruce, I think it's all been influenced by gospel music, but my dad was a singing school teacher and taught me to sing, me and my sister. And we went all over the community singing songs and singing harmonies and buck dancing and that kind of thing. But he was a gospel singer, and he loved gospel music. It was no big deal for him to walk 10 miles or 15 miles, even if it was raining.
Yeah.
To go to walk 10 or 15 miles to an all-day singing with dinner on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So he was an old-fashioned gospel singer, and so he started trying to teach me that, and I didn't want no part of it. I hated it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my kind of music, and it wasn't hip to me. It wasn't today. It was yesterday's music, and I didn't care for it.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of artists like Elvis Presley or Aretha Franklin, a lot of them came out of churches and out of gospel music, and so it seems like it's had a great impact on a lot of this music. To you, having your knowledge, experience, and your long career as a record producer, what makes a great song?
Well, a great song to me starts out with a great song title.
Mm-hmm.
An unusual title, Baby Don't Get Hooked on Me, You're Having My Baby. Those will catch your ear and you want to hear them. And of course, a great song, you have to have a great song to be a great record producer, and you've got to know when you're listening to a great song. You can't just go down the road and flip a coin and say, look, I want to find a hit record today.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of hard work, and of course we have 4 publishing companies, 2 recording studios in Muscle Shoals, and of course I had some of the best writers in the world writing with me or for me, the Mac Davises and the Paul Ankas, and of course Mac wrote In the Ghetto. He wrote Don't Cry Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
He had 4 hits by Elvis. Paul Anka had some of the biggest records of all time.
Mm-hmm.
They call it Puppy Love, and he had a huge record in the 60s and 70s called My Way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a huge big hit record. Probably one of the biggest records in the world.
And were you able to predict when a record would be a hit? Like, is there a formula?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know when they were hits. And that's a God-given talent, and God gave me that talent, and I exploited it and worked at it.
Yeah.
And became a big hit record producer because of the fact that I was knowledgeable about what was a hit and what wasn't a hit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew a hit record when I heard one.
That's something in your DNA that you said it's God-given, or is that something that you're able to pass on to someone else?
Well, I've got 3 sons, and so far I've not been able to pass it on to either one of them.
Now I understand.
But I would, if I could, I would. You know?
Yeah. I understand from your book, and again, the book is The Man from Muscle Shoals, My Journey from Shame to Fame by Rick Hall. I understand there's a difference between a great vocalist and a stylist. What's the difference?
Well, that's a great question. A stylist to me is Fats Domino or Gary U.S. Bonds. Mm-hmm. A singer is someone like Frank Sinatra or Etta James, Aretha Franklin, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a big difference because you might just get lucky and have a hit record on a song that you wrote, or a song that someone else wrote, but you have to be consistent, and you have to have more than one hit to be a hit record producer or a hit songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
So you've one hit record don't make you a hit record producer.
Yeah.
You know, it's tough.
And
It's hard. It's very hard.
yeah, and I heard from your book, The Man from Muscle Shoals, that you got in a fist fight with Aretha Franklin's husband.
Yeah, we went fisticuffed.
How did that happen?
Well, it happened in that he got drunk on the recording session, and he was overbearing, and he said to me and Jerry Wexler and the musicians there on the session, he said one of the white guys was making eyes at his wife. And so I said, well, what do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to fire him. And so I fired him. And then 30 minutes later, he got a little more tanked up. And he said, well, another guy making eyes at Aretha back there, and they were saying things like honey and darling and, you know, things. And that's the way we talk in the music business. And so he complained to me about that situation, and I said, well, what do you want me to do about it, Jerry? And Jerry said, well, fire him, Rick. So I had to let him go, and I was running out of horn players, you know.
Yeah.
And so consequently, the session was called off. We had to call the session off, and I had a few drinks, and I said, well, Jerry, I'm going to go over to the hotel where he's staying, and I'm going to make up with him. We'll have a drink, and everything will be cool tomorrow. And he said, oh, God, please don't go, Rick. You know, don't go over and make things. I mean, you're going to get in trouble. And I said, no, I won't make trouble. I'll be a good guy, you know. And so I went over there, and so he started degrading me and calling me names and things and so forth. And I called him names back, and I said, well, let me tell you something, Ted. His name was Ted White. I said, you're going to keep, and I'm going to go around and around. And so about that time, we started going around and around. And of course, we were on the 4th floor of the hotel, and he tried to throw me over, and I tried to throw him over the banister.
Wow.
And it was a bad scene. So that was the end. Jerry told me, he said, I will never set foot in your studio again. And I said, he said, I'll put you out of business. And I said, you can't put me out of business. And he said, well, how come I can't put you out of business? And I said, well, first of all, you're too old. I'm younger than you are, and I'll be around after you're dead and gone. And so I'm still here.
I have to compliment you because here you were, a white guy working in the South with black artists. And I understand racial unrest being what it was at that time. Did you receive any kind of backlash during those years?
Well, I did some, you know, because I was pretty rowdy, and being a band member and playing music and doing all the things I was doing, I ran into a lot of situations where I was scorned for working with black acts. Mm-hmm. And so to say I wasn't scorned or called bad names would be a lie. You know, I was no different from anybody else, but I endured it, and we made it fine. But a lot of black people, most of my band members and most of the people that I worked with were very kind to me, and I love black people to this day. I mean, I'm people think I'm black. In fact, a lot of the artists that came here thought that I was black when they got here, and they were disappointed that I wasn't, maybe. but we had hit records, and I was great friends with Otis Redding, and I was great friends with Aretha. I was great friends with Wilson Pickett and Etta James and all the people that I worked with. I became good friends, and we hit it off good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now,
yeah.
Now, Rick, you worked with the Osmonds. That must have been an interesting experience. I imagine they were pretty straight-laced, weren't they?
Very straight-laced. Very straight-laced. Yeah, they were. People called them. I didn't call them that, but I was a producer. But people said they had the Ipana smile, which means, they brushed their teeth good and they had white teeth.
Yeah.
But they were a great bunch of guys. I can't say anything except good things about them. Their dad came to record with them, and he came to Muscle shows, and we stayed out at my ranch. I have a cattle ranch, and I had 2 double-wide trailers out there, and so they stayed in them while they were here recording. And of course, Mac Davis and Jerry Reed and everybody else stayed in those trailers. They were called hospitality trailers. Mm-hmm. And so we'd play music all day and then rejoice all night. We'd listen to our music back at night, and so we had a lot of fun.
And again, let's remind the listeners, the book is The Man from Muscle Shoals, My Journey from Shame to Fame by Rick Hall. I highly recommend this book. You should get a copy. You can go on Amazon tonight and pick up a hard copy, or you can also get a Kindle book.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I appreciate that, because I usually forget I get carried away and forget about the book.
Oh, no problem. Now,
the book will start out being just a daily diary, mm-hmm. And then, of course, as time went by, I was cutting Wilson Pickett and Aretha Franklin and Joe Tex and Joe Simon and so forth, and so I was cutting so many people that somebody said, well, why don't you write a book? And I said, great idea. So I wrote the book based on the 10 years I had been producing all the records that I produced.
Mm-hmm. Do you have, of all the artists you worked with, is there one above the rest that was your ultimate favorite artist to work with?
Well, the Osmonds would be close. They were great kids, and of course they were. Oldest one was, I think, 17 or 18, and the youngest one was 8. Mm-hmm. And so they were brothers, and they were like stair steps, and they were terribly talented. And I'd have to say they were among the. Of course, Aretha was one of my favorites. Etta James was one of my favorites. Wilson Pickett was absolutely one of my favorites. We were big buddies, mm-hmm. And I spent a lot of time with him, and we hung out together in New York and places like that. Clarence Carter was a big one. We had a lot of hit records, number 1 records together. Mm-hmm. We had a record called Patches, which was one of my all-time favorite records because it was about. I thought it was about me and my father. Mm-hmm. And it was hard times and growing up and working at sawmills and sharecrop farming and that kind of thing. So I was a poor guy. I mean, I was really poor.
Yeah.
So he would have been one of my favorites too, Clarence Carter. I could go on for hours,
A couple of years ago, before you go, I wanted to ask you about this. I did my homework on you, obviously, and watched some previous.
Yeah, you sound like you did.
Yeah, and you said a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, you said in a Larry King interview that in 10 years there would be no more music. Do you still subscribe to that? And also, is that partly because of the internet?
Well, it's all because of the internet. Yeah. But not only the internet, but yes, I do subscribe to that. I still feel that way. I don't think people will be able to talk 20, 30 years from now, unless they take these apparatuses away from them. So there'll be no more storytelling. There'll be no more music as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
And there'll certainly be no more modern day music, because music is getting so bad.
Yeah.
And I hate to sit here and tell you this, but music is not what it used to be.
Right.
And I mean, you don't have songs like My Way and White Christmas and those kind of songs anymore. And the reason is because songwriters don't get paid for them, and neither do producers, because they put them on internet, and they can download them and get them for nothing, you know. And so if you buy a song for nothing, and you don't want to, if you don't pay anything for it, you don't want to. Then the musicians don't make any money. The songwriter don't make any money. The record producer don't make any money. The record company don't make any money. So the business is on its knees. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really is on its knees, Bruce.
Yeah.
When I started out, I was so hot that I could charge. I would charge $120 an hour for studio time. We thought it would always be that way, and so we were young and still wet behind the ears, and so we made all the money we could, and we got it while it was hot, you know.
Yeah.
And Jerry Wexler used to say to me, "Well, Rick, when you're hot, and when you're not, you can't give it away."
And now they're giving it away, ironically.
That's right. They're giving it away now, and can't give it away.
Yeah, that's true.
I think some things are going to change. There'll be people like me that will see the light and have a lot of influence on the music business, and we're going to go to the legislature, and we're going to do things to change all that. So, I mean, a man. Here's the thing, Bruce. If you're a musician and you play sessions and everybody thinks, man, this guy is really great, and you probably will be if you are playing sessions, because that's the top of the heap.
Yeah.
But when you get paid, even though you get union scale, and you get, we all got union scale, and we charge union scale, and I was union studio. A man can't make it and raise a family on a session a month.
Yeah.
And that's about what a musician works. He works about a month. He works about once a month. He may get a call. That way, he don't make that much money.
This is a great book, and I highly recommend that people pick up a copy. It's The Man from Muscle Shoals: My Journey from Shame to Fame by Rick Hall. Rick, it's been a real honor to talk to you this week.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it so much, Bruce. And if you're ever in Muscle Shoals, come by to see me. We'll hang out and take you to lunch or dinner or breakfast or whatever.
Great. I'll be sure and do that. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Bruce Collins Show, where you can find us every Friday night at midnight here at WWPR 1490 AM. Remember, God loves you. We do too. Don't give up.